More drop points for United in what was described as a lackluster display against Leicester. Where's your head with them, Simon? I mean, some people are saying they've given up. Some people are saying that they're drifting. What are they doing?
They're not a very good side, are they? They're not a very good side. And, of course, we can make the argument, as Gary Neville has made, about the lack of coaching. I had genuinely thought that Rangnick would come in and wake a few of these players up, because they do need waking up. But he hasn't.
No.
And I think he's added to the state of flux that exists in that football club, that no one quite knows where they're going, what they should and shouldn't be doing, and people are being allowed to get away with a low level of performance, they're an under-aroused, under-motivated football team that is coasting through the rest of this season. And I had really wanted to make a case, to back up my own case, of the idea that they would finish fourth. I cannot see a parallel universe where they're going to finish fourth. They're a poor, poor side. They have nothing about them. They're very easy to play against. They don't have any particular energy or zest or any movement off the ball. I watched them against Leicester. They're just a very average side with a splattering of highly paid footballers that on paper have big reputations, but when it comes to being on the pitch, they're nowhere near it. And there's going to have to be a massive change of direction of the culture of the players that they recruit, the DNA of those players to fit the fabric of what a good player really looks like in reality, rather than what a good player looks like on the piece of paper that you're studying what they once upon a time did. And United have got to have a big sea change.
I mean, to be honest, Danny, to be fair to you, you said Rangnick, no, he's not the man. You said right from the word go, he won't do it.
Well,
Graham Souness spoke to me in Glasgow.
I agreed with Graham,
because
there's nothing on his CV to suggest he's ever done it before with players of such calibre and big egos and players like, he's not done it before with players like that, so it was a risk. Now watching the team get worse and worse from week to week, as Simon's right in terms of how easy they are to play against. He goes on here to talk about, he started talking about how over the next 2 or 3 windows they need to get it right, and talking about bringing players in who are more physically aggressive, better athletes, etc. He talks about it's to do with minds. It's the DNA of the players, not mindset. Hard to change a technically great player into a physical aggressive player. Well, I beg to differ on that. I beg to differ. If you go through the Liverpool and Man City squads and team, there's a lot of very, very gifted technical players who have improved their physical output because of their manager's instruction and the way he set up the team. If you look at the numbers, I mean, David Silva was the best example I ever saw of his physical numbers changing under Pep. I mean, he walked into a Manchester City squad where he had one of the best number 10s, if you like, David Silva, everybody loves, and rightly so. He got physically better. He won more duels. He scored more goals. He got more assists. This is all under Pep, right? So this argument about not being able to make technically gifted players better physically and produce better defensive displays is a bit nonsensical to me.
Well, let's listen to him, because that's a good point you make, Danny. Is he wrong in what he says? Because he does say, Rangnick, the club needs to follow City and Liverpool's example.
Those two teams have been built together and recruited over a period of 5-6 years. All of them under the premises of how do the two coaches want to play. And this is what has to happen. That far I can go right now, and I told the board already that this is what has to happen. Whenever the new head coach and manager is clear, it has to be congruent to how does the manager want to play and what kind of players do we need for that. And then again, we come back to DNA, physicality, speed, tempo, what do we need? And I think this team does not lack technical players. I think we can do with more physicality. It also has to be a little bit in the DNA of a player, to be honest. I mean, it's difficult to change a, technical, filigrane player into a physical, aggressive player. And I think we have a lot of, as you quite rightly said, technical players. It takes right decisions, knowing where do you want to go to, what kind of manager, what kind of players do we need for that. And then in every transfer window, try to get the best possible players for that. And this is possible. This is not rocket science. It's just, it needs to be done, and it has to be done. And if that happens, it does not necessarily need 3 or 4 years for that. Maybe 2 or 3 transfer windows, then the situation could be different.
This needs to be done. This is Manchester United, as you always tell us, Simon. So why hasn't it been done?
Because there's been an abdication of responsibility. There's been the appointment of poor managers for 3 years. You've allowed Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to run the football club for 3 years, which is almost laughable. Prior to that, you had Mourinho in, and Mourinho won you things, but because the culture of Mourinho attracts a certain reputation and rapport, and because he decided to go very dark, we departed from that, and you've left 3 years of attrition. And in that 3 years, the other two clubs that you're supposedly chasing down, Liverpool and Man City, have continued to evolve. And you've regressed, so the gap's got wider. And a lot of what he's saying isn't necessarily wrong. I mean, Danny's going to come into this conversation and talk about the dynamics of how players can be improved. But your default setting is if you're a naturally passive person, it's very difficult to get you to become an aggressive person. And he talked about earlier on in the season about getting a psychologist in to talk about overcoming adversity. What he's really talking about is getting players that understand what resilience is, players that can actually, not aggressive in terms of putting your foot in, aggressive in their determination to overcome obstacles. United players, are lightweight mentally. They're over-rewarded, over-recognised, and not over-performing. And I think he's right to turn around and say we need a different kind of player in this club that understands what the obstacles are.
We don't need Rangnick telling us that. The man in the street at London Bridge this lunchtime could tell us that. And he goes on. I thought a phrase DNA of a club was a phrase you hated, Simon.
DNA of player he's talking about.
Rangnick talks about it all the time. The DNA of a player.
We're talking about player, not club. Talking about the players, the DNA of a player, the makeup of a player. We use a different word than the makeup. The makeup of a player, we need a more resilient. We need a person that can react to adversity. We need someone that when adversity comes, they rise to the challenge.
Yeah.
Whether that's...
But is that not a given with Manchester United?
What he's also talking about is when a manager goes in with a philosophy of a way of wanting to play, you go and find the players to play in that system. He's right about that. He is right. And there hasn't been that. Manchester United have been buying players just because they're a good player and they'll throw them in the squad rather than bringing players in to fit into a system. My bit of what he's talking about is one of the problems United have got. You cannot tell me that... I mean, he's talking about this lack of physicality in the United side. What do you mean, lack of physicality? So can Shaw not get up and down? Is he not quick enough? Wan-Bissaka? Fit? Rashford quick enough? Strong enough? McTominay, 6 foot.
What does he mean by physicality?
No, hold on.
What does he mean by physicality?
What he does? He's talking about physicality, aggressive players. He says that physically aggressive.
Well, physical presence.
Yeah, they've got that, but the technical players he's talking about Fernandes, Pogba, and Ronaldo.
Yeah,
that's all you can give me. They're the only three you can be talking about because the rest of them are physically capable of being aggressive. All of them. So give me a player in that who can't do the yards.
But where does the physicality start from? If physicality starts from your mind, it's a state of mind.
Yes.
Right? So he's talking about their state of mind. So you can make an argument that Luke Shaw can get up and down. Luke Shaw can do this, but if he hasn't got it in his mind, if he isn't that sort of personality,
who creates and helps the player's mindset more than anybody, the manager and the coach.
Yeah, but you can't turn a silk purse or sow's ear into a silk purse. It will always be a sow's ear. It might look good every now and again.
So do you think Kevin De Bruyne, and do you think David Silva, do you think Bernardo Silva, do you think name any of the City players really? Do you think their physical output would be the same under a different manager?
What do you mean by physical output?
It's a great question.
I'm on about
where you're going with it.
Duels won, distance covered, high intensity. Aguero was a great example when he kept leaving him out of teams, so he wouldn't do the work. Do you think you would see Kevin De Bruyne work as hard as he would because he's a super elite footballer if he hadn't been under the stewardship of Guardiola?
No.
Do you think if he was playing under Solskjaer, Bernardo Silva would work as hard?
No, I think that's absolutely right. That's why the argument of having Solskjaer in place against those two guys was always flawed.
But this is the thing, I'm picking on Rangnick here. He's coming out and talking about
Do you think Pogba, if he was playing... Okay, let's extrapolate that argument. Do you think Pogba, if he was playing for Guardiola or for Klopp, would do the things that he doesn't do for Man United?
Yes.
They'd get him to do it.
Because did you see his performance for France in the World Cup when he marked Fellaini in the second half and 3 headers in the 6-yard box? He can do it.
Right.
He does. There's no repercussions from not doing it.
He's got a choice here.
So I'm not suggesting that a player can be totally changed by one coach. You have to have some sort of resilience.
But it can be enhanced.
It can be enhanced to Bruno Fernandes is a great example. Bruno Fernandes is quick. He can run all day. He's got the athleticism of he's tall and thin. He can do the yards.
Yeah.
Do you think Bruno Fernandes would defend better playing for Klopp or Guardiola? Yes, he would, because he can.
So by this argument,
the reason he doesn't,
surely Rangnick's got to be asking himself, why are they not doing it for me?
Rangnick's hiding behind the fact he hasn't got enough physical, aggressive players in the squad to do what he wants to do. Wrong. You've got 3 who don't do what you want to do. 1 because he can't anymore, Ronaldo, and the other 2 because you don't consequent them for not doing it and you don't coach them the right way to do it. Their defensive structure tactically is all over the place. Jurgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola, if they went to United and had as long as Rangnick, you would see players not playing if they didn't do the yards. They don't get that at United. Tuchel, Ronaldo throw his dummy out if he doesn't play. Pogba, whoever it may be.
Right.
Rangnick's gone in there with no experience of dealing with players of this calibre or this.
But we had all that. Okay, then we go back to the argument and we pull Mourinho out of the hat, right? And we say Mourinho was having none of Pogba. None of Pogba.
But Mourinho won 2 trophies and finished second in the league.
I know he did. But the bottom line is the people that look back on Mourinho's time, if you listen to this show, we'll talk about Mourinho, forget that he finished second, bona fide second in the league.
We
not second
do.
in a poor league. No, we don't. But other people sit in this room and say, look at Mourinho did at Man United. And it's that period of time where he lost his way. But Mourinho had a war with Pogba. And he wanted to change the way people... And Pogba wouldn't have any of it. So I wonder if Pogba would be the same wherever he wants. And this argument...
Possibly.
And that's a challenge we've got. The group of players they've recruited are on... Jadon Sancho. I don't know why they bought Jadon Sancho. Why they had to move everything to have Jadon Sancho.
Because they didn't really need him, you mean?
Well, yeah.
They had a lot of attacking players.
Yeah,
anyway.
and you look at it, and your argument is they've got to buy the right players rather than just players that prima facie look like good players in other people's environments. United is a unique environment. And Rangnick, I think you've got to give him a little bit of dispensation because when you're unwinding 3 or 4 years of low standards with players that have got it embedded in their psyche, look at Marcus Rashford. He doesn't even get picked on Saturday. And people are going to say, did you kill Rashford because of that? No, Rashford killed Rashford to not even be in a side where you put Bruno Fernandes as your false 9.
Well, I think the manager that's where Rangnick has some. Because if I'm going in the door when Rangnick did, I'm putting my arm around Rashford and working him on the train and getting him out on the pitch because he's dynamic and he's quick and he's better and at least he'll run around and defend and do those things you want. Lingard, one of the fittest players you'll have, intelligent.
Will he?
Yeah, he will.
We've been trying to work out where Rashford's been for 18 months.
18 months, come on.
Yeah, I think so.
He got over 20 goals last season.
Did he?
Yeah, in all
you
competitions.
You gave me that statistic the other day, and I went back and
there
checked
in
it.
black and white,
sure
all
that you were
competitions.
right.
No, you looked at league goals. That's why.
Okay, because that's
probably the answer to the question I put right at the beginning is United are actually worse than drifting.
They're all over the place.
They are.
But my point is only this, just to simplify and clarify. My point is only this. He makes some good points about what is needed and how Liverpool and City have done things in terms of identifying players to fit into a system.
Yeah.
But every one of those players at Liverpool and City have got better under the stewardship of Klopp and Guardiola.
And by the way, in fairness, Leicester City are not a bad side. So
Leicester are a good side.
So it was never a gimme, that game.
But that's 4 games without a win, isn't it? So my disappointment in Rangnick is that he's now talking about, yes, some obvious things that are needed, but he's got more than enough in his armoury at Manchester United to be in a better position than they are. Because you can't tell me McTominay and Fred can't run more than any other centre midfielders in the Premier League. They can.
Yeah.
You can talk about their quality or creativity, but you can't talk about physically aggressive. He's got enough players in that squad who are physically aggressive. I could go and pick a United 11 tomorrow, work to be physically aggressive and capable. No one's outrunning Wan-Bissaka.
Sure.
Luke Shaw's one of the best left-backs in the Euros. Nobody bullies Maguire. You might run behind him, but nobody physically bullies him.
But they were physically competitive against Atletico. They still got beat.
Were they physically?
McTominay was putting it about a little bit in that particular game. They worked very hard, but they still came out of that particular draw with nothing because the quality of the team isn't there.
They're carrying players. When you talk about physical aggression and being on the front, you've all got to be together in football. Man City don't carry one. Liverpool don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Liverpool, you could argue a little bit carry Salah to a degree.
Well, they've got the chance to be physically aggressive and not carry each other when they go to Goodison this coming Saturday at 12:30. We'll see what happens there.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.